Heidi ho, and welcome to another fantastic, titillating episode of the Dennis and Andy Show. It is Wednesday, and Wednesday is wacky new comic book day and the Dennis and Andy Show. We are a little early today because that's right, I have to pick my daughter up from work at 5. Randy Howell is in the house. JP Roca, hello. Randy's already popping links. He is the man when it comes to that stuff. I tell you. Thank you so much for that. We also have Howder 6480. Hello. And cool. We'll be bringing our guest, Christian Bladt, soon enough. He actually, of course, has his own podcast as well. I'm just looking for the link. Let's see if I clicked the right one. I did. There you go. You can catch Christian there. Christopher Lord, hello, good sir. And today we will be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. That's Uno, Dos, Tres, Volume 3. And it's going to be with spoilers. Now, the nice thing about this movie, Christian actually brought this up before the show when we were talking. I guess the biggest spoiler we'll get to... we'll just get to it. But the point is, it's not a bad one. I guess that's how you could say it.
Yeah, let's just say I avoided. I was in Greenville for the weekend, and I knew I wasn't going to get a chance. I was crossing my fingers. I tried to, but swim meets went really, really long, so I didn't get a chance to see it until I got back, so I tried avoiding everybody. I didn't want to get the spoilers of who was going to die in the movie. So I am glad I avoided everyone. I got to see it Monday so that we were going to be up and running for today.
That's right. So we'll bring in our guest. You know him from his show, The Blattcast. It is Christian Bladt. Hello.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on again. And wonderful to see everybody in the chat. Already sharing my plugs. I'll still do it myself, but I appreciate the assist.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah, Randy is the best at that. He will put everything in there. So keep it up, Randy, and go for it.
So one of the things going into this movie, the second time, when I saw it with Dennis and his wife, I told him, I said, this is not a spoiler. This will not reveal anything. But I said there was one part in the movie where when it happened, I thought to myself, I love this. Susie, Dennis's wife, will love it. And I guarantee Dennis will hate it. And when it happened, I was correct.
It was. So
go ahead, tell me what it was.
I am not a Beastie Boys fan. My whole family loves Beastie Boys. So as soon as I heard the song come on, I was like, oh my God, of course. Another movie with the Beastie Boys. And he's like, I knew it. My wife's like, and I've got these two sitting there doing this in the theater, right? Surrounding me, literally. That's my biggest criticism of the movie.
But can you be happy that it wasn't sabotage for once? I mean, 2 of the 3 J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies had sabotage in it. And, the trailer for the Marvels already has Intergalactic. So there's a lot of Beastie Boys licensing out there. It was not my favorite selection from the soundtrack. I thought it was a good moment in the movie, but it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't as bad. I mean, I was very critical of the music in Thor: Love and Thunder, a movie I didn't hate as much as everybody, but it's like the same 4 basic Guns N' Roses songs that, a junior high schooler would put on a mixtape in 1989. So, I think that James Gunn excels at that. And I can commend most of the music. I think it fit the moment. But, if I have to side with one of you, I'm on Andy's side. But Dennis, you're not entirely wrong. Let's put it that way.
Oh, that's a very good Switzerland neutral viewpoint. I love it.
Yeah, that was.
I will say overall, we can talk soundtrack. I do love both soundtracks for the first one. Overall, I think this was another good soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
Again, everything with whatever the moment was in the feeling of that moment in the scene, the music seemed to fit it. I had no complaints. I loved almost all the music personally. So again, this will be a soundtrack I will purchase. Again, I can just skip over with, today's technology and skip over the Beastie Boys.
Not me. We just got a record player for my daughter for her birthday this past week. And I'm thinking I might have to get this soundtrack on vinyl. So,
I've seen the vinyl for this. It's at Target. It's kind of everywhere. It does look nice, but I agree. There's some great stuff on this soundtrack. For me, as essentially a lifelong Alice Cooper fan, there is a deep album cut that is on this, and it's when Gamora is on the ship by herself. It's a song called I think it's I'm Always Chasing Rainbows or Just Chasing Rainbows. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe that that's, if you're going to put an Alice Cooper song in a movie, you wouldn't think it would be that one, So, some nice stuff. And, a number of the songs we had gotten in the trailer, but still,
Yeah.
it was some great moments musically, as always, as with all three of these films.
Yeah. So the basic gist of this movie, for those watching, the basic plot is Warlock is now introduced to the Marvel Universe. He is supposed to go get Rocket Raccoon from nowhere to basically bring him back to the High Evolutionary because basically he was the lab experiment gone wrong in the sense that he's really smart. And the High Evolutionary wants to get in there and get his brain so he can kind of figure out the chemistry or whatever, what's going on to further other experiments that he's
duplicate
doing.
it.
Yeah, duplicate it. So that's the basic gist of it. I mean, the movie does right out of the gate. It sets up they're living in nowhere. Star-Lord is, Chris Pratt is basically wallowing in misery because he doesn't have Gamora and stuff. And then boom, Warlord comes in. You get to see him fight and see his power set and stuff. So, I mean, that's really what kicks off the whole movie. And then,
it's now, just so you know, for those of you who hadn't seen it, there will be spoilers. So remember that. Come back and watch it later if you don't want to be spoiled. This is a 2-hour and 30-minute movie. So this was the longest run of any of the Guardians movies. And I will sit there and say right now, I was not bored. It did not feel like 2 hours and 30 minutes, which is a good thing for a movie. It had lots of details, lots of good story in it. And I never once looked at my watch or felt bored or felt like this is running too long.
You don't wear a watch.
Yeah, I agree. It's basically they added 15 minutes to each of the Guardians movies. Guardians 2 is like 2:15 after the first one was 2 hours. So James Gunn's like, yeah, I'm going to take 15 more minutes. And when you consider the running times for some of these movies, 2.5 is at least respectable. They tried to show some restraint, and I agree. I think it moved really well, and they really kind of hit the ground running, in terms of simultaneously giving us Rocket's backstory, but then also by advancing the present day plot. I think it was a nice balance back and forth.
Yeah, I would agree. I also thought the one thing that I was leery about with the extra length and stuff like that was which characters are they going to focus on? Is somebody not going to get any love in this movie? How are they going to do it? And I will say right now, I thought every character got its moment to shine. I thought everybody did it. Even Groot, I thought even being CG, Vin Diesel not in a lot, I really enjoyed the fact that every character had their moment to shine. Their interpersonal relationships were fantastic. Some really kicked it up a notch. And if I was going to say, I really enjoyed the Gamora storyline, being the new Gamora, because she's the one who didn't really know Peter. So you've got this entire storyline going around on a character that he really doesn't know. And the role reversal with Nebula, who was my personal favorite. I think she has had the most growth. I so enjoyed her character throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, I thought she was really good. And the thing with Gamora is, to me, the way she was treated in this one, because it is the old one without the memories and stuff, was more like the Gamora in the comics, just kind of like a fighter, no BS. and I like that. And I like seeing Zoe Saldana, act that way as well. Um, Warlock, I thought, well, I mean, what did you guys think about Warlock and Whole?
Yeah, like Christian asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because, if you think about sort of the earliest iteration of the character, and you have to take some steps back, because even if you go 30 years ago, like Infinity Gauntlet,
Mm-hmm.
Adam Warlock, he's already super powerful. If you have him now, he's like, I don't know, omnipotent, really. Omnipotent. I can't even say the word because I'm clearly not either of those things. But, he's like, next level. He's like more
Yeah.
powerful than Galactus. And you can't have that. And I think, not to get too bogged down in Captain Marvel, but I think what they did with that character in her movie, she's too powerful right away,
Right.
Yes.
and you can't have that Adam Warlock show up. And I think similarly, the High Evolutionary was more of just a crazy inventor guy who invented some cool gadgets for himself instead of the, somewhat all powerful being that we know from the comics. So it's a choice with Adam Warlock. I think he's a little dumber than I expected, but they gave reasons for it. He basically popped out of the cocoon before he was done cooking. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at it as there's a lot of potential for that character, a lot of room to grow. So I'm okay with him in this movie, assuming that eventually he seems more like the Adam Warlock we might know. But what did you guys think?
I mean, I agree totally. Nicholas says Warlock sucked, worst part of the movie. He liked the rest of it. I disagree. I didn't hate him. It definitely wasn't what I was expecting for Warlock, and I expected more screen time from him. But because they did cover their butts by saying, "Oh well, you brought him out of this cocoon too early," I was like, "Okay." And that also helps with the power aspect because you said he's a super powerful character. Um, I thought Will Poulter actually did a really nice job as Warlock, acting wise. From honestly the little bit that he was in it, because he really wasn't in it a ton. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I liked him. I definitely want to see more of him.
I
And
thought
more
it was a
growth.
good intro.
Right.
When I'm looking at the weakest character in the movie, for me, it was Warlock. I mean, hands down,
Well,
he was the
yeah,
weakest point. But he's not the focal point of the show.
no,
They're introducing him. He's in an aspect of the plot, but they're really just setting him up for future iterations in
right,
movies. And it did its job. And I liked what they did with him by explaining, because I agree. Adam Warlock's too strong, too powerful. He's really related to the Infinity Gem. So since that entire storyline's gone, I'm really trying to figure out where they want to go with him now. He would have been better introduced quite a while ago. But I like what they did with him, and I thought he played him great. It was just meh in terms of his impact in the actual story. Again, I'll go back to like Gamora and Nebula, their roles became reversed because Nebula was the
yes,
hardcore warrior throughout all of this. And it was always, Gamora that was always trying to get her the humanity and get her to see it and come back. And now you see the roles are reversed. The new Gamora is in with the Ravengers. It's all about fighting and she just wants to kick butt. And it's Nebula going, you know what? And she's developed relationships. So I loved how this movie brought full circle or complete cycle, if you want to go that route, their characterizations over
Yeah, it's like
time.
this Gamora is the way that Nebula kind of always saw her. I mean, she even says in this movie, she was always like that, but then they
yeah,
kind of, she did soften a little bit the longer she was away from Thanos. I mean, between Volume 2 and Infinity War, I think I read that, in the chronology, there's like 4 years of them, going on adventures that we never saw. So
right,
it's a very different character. I wanted to go back to Adam Warlock for just a second. Whenever a character spends a lot of the movie unconscious, you realize they don't know what to do with them. I always think back to the Future Part 2. They show up in the future, Marty and his girlfriend, and she's asleep in the trunk for most of the movie because they're like, we have no idea what to do with her. We were just stuck with her. So I think that they could have done more with Warlock, but it's like we're saying, I think it's more about, the next move, the next time we see Adam Warlock is really what I think they're setting up,
Yeah, Amish Ninja mentioned something in there. He goes, Warlock's sole purpose is to fight Thanos, which is what it was in the comics. Without Thanos, there's no need for him.
Yeah.
There is truth if you're looking at it strictly from the Marvel Universe perspective. That really was his purpose. So they have to invent a purpose now, something to do with probably outer space. They'll find uses for him. I think he will be in, future movies. So we'll see what happens. Because, Drax won't be in anymore, with him not wanting to play him anymore. So we'll see what they do with it.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And, just to give credit to a character who I think really standing out started with the holiday special. Just Mantis is always so delightful. They, just getting more out of her. The way that she goes back and forth from, being very sweet to screaming, and
yes.
Her and Drax really were, the fact that almost that entire Christmas special was the two of them was like, yeah, that's the perfect pairing. So I was glad we got to kind of see more of it. And, sort of the very funny moment where he's like, you think I'm stupid? And then she's like, oh, wait, I better make sure he forgets that, just all that stuff.
She's like, the first time I saw the movie, I was like, oh my God, they're just tearing Drax down and he's standing right there. And, then he goes, and you felt bad for him. He's like, you think I'm stupid? And then she's just like, forget.
But I love the fact that the redemption came later on, because when the children are involved, and she goes, you were never meant to be a destroyer. You were meant to be a father. Right. And do with it. And I was like, oh, I'm just getting goosebumps again thinking about it. It was just such a good moment, because you actually felt bad for Drax throughout a lot of this. Him sitting on the couch. No, sit up. It's not meant to do this. He had such good, funny comedic roles, but it wasn't over the top funny in almost everything. And Drax's interaction landed for me comedic wise.
Yeah, and I think that there is a kind of the redeeming moment when it turns out he spoke the language of all the refugee kids.
Yeah.
And, he just has the, it's like, why didn't you tell us earlier that you spoke? And he just has the very literal, very Drax answer. You didn't ask.
Right. And that was perfect for his character. And, just the nice thing about this movie compared to Love and Thunder, this movie, obviously, like the previous two, had its laughs and stuff, but Love and Thunder, it all just, to me, 75% of it just looked forced. I don't picture a Thor movie with that vibe, but this movie you do, but none of it looked forced. It didn't come across like, oh my God, they're really trying to pump up the laugh factor in this one. I haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2 in a long time, but I would be willing to bet that it's probably a nice same amount percentage-wise of laughs in this movie as there was in those. So they weren't, James Gunn wasn't like, oh yeah, let's really make this a comedy or something. And it all fit with everybody's character as well. It was, I told my daughter this after the first time, and Dennis after we saw it, I said, this was such a great capper for a trilogy. You look at the 3 Iron Man movies. The third Iron Man movie didn't come across as like, okay, there probably won't be any more standalone Iron Man movies. The third Cap movie didn't feel that way either. But this one really did feel, and I think we know it, there isn't going to be another Guardians of the Galaxy movie. So Gunn did a really nice job in the story itself with, Rocket's backstory, the High Evolutionary, and just, kind of wrapping everything up into a nice, tidy ball to send you out with.
Well, I think he was wrapping up because it's his end of time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, end of the time with Guardians. So I thought he did a beautiful job of wrapping up the Guardians storyline and making it all make sense. especially, when he had, the Christmas special, and you had, the fallout from the Infinity War that had to be taken into it. But then, as a nice send away, as thank you, Marvel fans, for everything, now I'm heading over to DC. But he tied everything up very nicely with a bow. I thought it was a great send off for everybody.
Yeah, now he's going to be slumming it with some guy in a cape and wears his underwear outside of his pants. But I
No
imagine
fashion.
that.
But I gotta tell you, it's funny because when Gunn first released that whole DC video about what they're doing and blah blah blah. A part of watching that, you could tell certain parts where it's like, dude, you're just full of crap because these things were already in the can before you came on board. How he's talking about, oh, and Shazam does this, and Flash is going to set up blah blah blah. Then there's Aquaman. It's like, dude, all this crap was pretty much in the can. You had nothing to do with it. So I get it. You're part of the DC family now. You've got to kind of spew that line. But this movie really makes me more excited to see what he is going to do because he did such a good job on this movie.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that, the work that he's done for both Marvel and DC in the last few years, you can't help but be excited for whatever's next. I mean, the second Suicide Squad movie compared to the first, the first one's barely watchable. And I really love the Peacemaker series, which is not something that I expected going into it.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything against John Cena, but I wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to watch a TV show starring him ever in my life. And the shows were both, that was all great. This was great. The one thing that you said earlier, though, Andy, is that I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't another Guardians movie, just not with James Gunn and not right away. I think we'll see them in Avengers movies. I think it wouldn't be just the characters at the end of this movie. I think that they'd put some heavy hitters in there, maybe bring back somebody. But I think at some point there'll be a fourth Guardians movie. It's just not right away.
It could be, especially with they introduce Phyla at the end, so we can find out, are they going to utilize that as a good quasar up in the future? I mean, they've got stuff to work with. But I think one thing that we really need to talk about is the heart of this entire story. And really, this movie is about Rocket. It's really Rocket's story. It's he's been the underappreciated character. I think everybody's liked him as the character. Star-Lord always kind of took the shine, from it. But realistically, I kind of think Rocket was the heart and soul of all the movies in a way. And you get to go back. We now get to see how he was created and made and tore down and what he had to endure.
What he went through, yeah.
Even as the other Guardians are seeing this, and they're like, why did he never tell us this? I mean, it was so dramatic as a person, because I know I'm going to be taking my niece and nephew to see this because they haven't seen it yet. There's going to be some really hard moments, both the physical torture that he endured, the emotional torture that he endured. And now you start going back. I actually want to go back and rewatch 1 and 2 because a lot of Rocket's comments now make so much more sense when you see how he uses, anger and comedy and stuff as a defensive mechanism. But now you understand why. And this movie gave Rocket purpose and reason for everything. And it was just so beautifully done, I thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I rewatched the first Guardians yesterday. I haven't rewatched the second one yet, but I did it kind of for that reason. And yeah, there's little things. When they first when they were arrested and they show him on the screen, his known associates include Lila, which is a little hard to imagine that there'd be a record of this otter character that never really got outside the cage, but it's still nice. And, they refer to him as, 8931P or whatever it is. They refer to him as that in the first one. So, I like seeing little moments like that. The second Guardians, I don't remember very well because I just remember I was a little bit underwhelmed by it. I was a little disappointed. So I'm excited to watch it again in the context of this. But I mean, even what I remember just sitting here for this third movie, it's like it's this payoff of like, okay, we're really going to tell Rocket's story right now. And like you were saying, Dennis, it's like we all loved Rocket, but maybe we didn't expect to spend this much time finding out about him. You know what I mean? I don't think he was the guy we expected to spend that much time with, but I thought it was great. And I know what you're saying. It does seem a little tough to watch. It was something I didn't think of as I was watching, but it's more comments that people I knew talked about is just some of the, even though it's almost all off screen, but the implied treatment of animals, specifically Rocket, the fact that Nebula's watching the video and says, this is worse than what Thanos did to me.
Yes.
And you just glance at her and you can see what that, cut out her eyes. They talk about it in the movie. So yeah, I can see it making people uncomfortable. I mean, there are noises while they're watching the video of the High Evolutionary basically creating Rocket. So, and I always think of this in terms of my kids. My son's about to be 8, my daughter's 5. And, my son has expressed interest in watching the first one. And that was part of the reason I rewatched it the other day. I was like, let me make sure. And I'm like, all right, there's a couple of words I don't want to introduce into his vocabulary, but I'm pretty sure he's heard them on the playground. So it'll be all right,
Well, this was the first movie. And Randy says, are there flashbacks to Rocket's painful experiments? Yes, there are. And yeah, you can take your girlfriend to it unless she's real squeamish when it comes to animal stuff. But one of the things, so 2 things they did in this movie. One, Chris Pratt, first Marvel movie, I believe. I don't count Deadpool. This is PG-13. Drops an F-bomb. That was hysterical. Just leading up to, so basically, there are spoilers in this. They're on Counter Earth, which is all, it looks like our Earth, but it's all, populated by creatures the High Evolutionary created, which are basically animals that are, walking, talking, whatever. And they have to borrow a car. And this car looks like it's from the 80s. So Chris Pratt gets in it, and Nebula's having a hard time getting in the car. And Chris is explaining, Star-Lord's explaining to her. She finally gets in it, and he's just like, get in the fucking car. So that was hysterical.
First F-bomb, in the Guardians movie.
First F-bomb in an MCU proper film, because obviously, to Andy's point, Deadpool might have used a couple. But it was, and it was like, I had heard that going in, that it was going to have it, and it's just not in the context you'd expect, And I think that's the deal with PG-13. I think you get one. I think you can use it one time in a PG-13 movie. And I was like, I'm glad that James Gunn used it for a joke,
Yes, exactly. I thought it was very well done. The theater erupted. It was just a great moment of levity. Everybody laughed. It was good. I'm glad.
But then the other thing was seeing the High Evolutionaries face after what Rocket, did to it. And that was, that made Harvey Dent, Two-Face, in the Christian Bale movie look like nothing. Look like child's play compared to how mangled his face was. It was pretty hardcore.
People who are, if you're in deep in the lore of Hannibal Lecter, that's like very reminiscent of the character Mason Verger.
Yes.
That was the first time I'd seen something that reminded me of like, oh, that's rough. Yeah, and I think it's that scene's so important that Rocket. The whole point of him is that he doesn't have that rage inside, except when you touch it off, we all have it in us. And look, I think that the person in the chat wondering if they could bring their girlfriend about it. I think. Yes, if you're exceptionally squeamish, it might not be something, but I think that actually, if you're bringing someone who, maybe they're vegan, maybe they're very pro animal rights, I don't think that they're going to see it as a negative. They're going to see it as in like, yes, this is what happens,
Right.
And I'm glad that they didn't shy away from it, because it's like, what do you think it's like when things get tested on animals? You can be for or against it if you want to. I think it's better to test on animals than humans. Let me just say that.
Sure.
High Evolutionary might disagree, but he's not here to talk about it. But I think that they handled it really well. And I don't know, I guess I was surprised in some of the reactions from people I know who saw it, that, just the level of discomfort they had, after the fact.
Well, the one thing that took me, and I said it was a little sad about, was I really enjoyed the Evolutionary Wars in the comics. I like the High Evolutionary. I really wanted to see it. I thought when the facial mask came off, it was going to be like the purple mechanical metallic type mask underneath. I really wanted to see that. So I was a bit shocked that that is what we got. It made sense, and I see why they did it. I was a little bummed about it for that reason. I wanted to see the classic face, but since he might not be gone, we might get to see it somewhere down the line, because he is a villain that looks like he might be sticking around. So, Christian, I just want to get your take. As a villain, how did you think the High Evolutionary was as a Marvel villain?
So I agree with what you're saying. I didn't think about it, but boy, that would have been really cool if we had seen sort of the mask. And it's very difficult to say the name of the actor, but I want to give credit to, I think it's Chukwudi Iwuji. He was also in Peacemaker, a very different character and a very different performance, and he's great in both of them. And I think it's really hard when you play maniacal supervillain. And I think he did it great, and I think it can be very tough to walk that line where it's not too much. You can see that he's got this short fuse and that, he's not entirely rational as somebody who will basically destroy a planet and give it another go and try it again. And I think the interesting thing about that moment is really the most defining thing, I think, about this iteration of the High Evolutionary. It's basically Star-Lord points out, yeah, I didn't like watching, that meth deal that I drove by. And he's like, yeah, I know. And that's why I want to destroy it. And it's like he was planning on destroying it. He's like, yeah, I got to get rid of it right now. You're absolutely right. I was maybe going to destroy it another day, but let's just go ahead and get rid of it now. And sort of how impulsive he is. And even the people around the High Evolutionary towards the end of the film trying to take over for him, because they're like, yeah, obviously you're too obsessed with this. I don't know. I thought it was great, and it was not exactly what I was expecting when I knew the High Evolutionary was in this movie. I was glad, as I said earlier, that they didn't have him be too much more powerful than he was. I think the High Evolutionary that we know from the comics, they wouldn't have had a chance against him. All the Guardians, they could have played 3 Beastie Boys songs and not been able to beat him up.
Did I miss it? Because in the comics, he was from Earth. And I am assuming throughout this movie, I don't think he said, I appreciate Earth's art and I appreciate all of this stuff. I think Earth's really good on this. But they never said he was from Earth or that he originated.
They imply that he's not, because he says he's visited there. He's seen it. He likes the art. We don't know where he's from, but we assume that he is, I don't know what the different physical representation of the Sovereign are in the MCU. So I'm not really sure exactly where he is, but the fact that in the first Guardians movie, the Nova Prime database knows this experiment number for Rocket means that it's probably connected to the Kree or, some of the associates there. But no, I think he's definitely not a human though.
Right. One of the things with him that I was disappointed in was, when you first saw him in the trailer, obviously it's the actor. So you're like, oh, they're not doing the cool mask. But they didn't even touch. They didn't even try to get close to his colors accurate. And I'm like, how hard would it have been? Because I thought his suit, the armor, whatever he was wearing was fine. But I'm just like, why did you do blue? I mean, there is nothing of his colors for comic book fans like us to connect it to, So I thought that was a missed thing. But like you said, if he comes back, because it's not like he died or anything. I mean, you don't know what happened to him, we'll say. he could have the face thing, and his costume would obviously be different and stuff. So,
Well, he
Yeah, I
wasn't.
think so. Just to quickly
Okay.
on the armor, I think it worked really well with Kang in Quantumania, where you saw it a little bit. You had the color scheme. He
yeah,
wasn't dressed like that the whole time. So yeah, I think if you'd had a glimpse of it, it would have
just
been.
something.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Sorry, Dennis.
No, it's fine. As a villain, I enjoyed him as I actually thought he was probably the best of the Guardians villains in terms of pure villainy.
Yeah,
Um, you know, at the beginning when he's talking about and you're seeing and you're going through the history of it, you're like, you could almost understand. Oh, I see why he's doing this. I see why he's doing that. And you're like, maybe he's not such a bad guy. And then you're like, and then he just keeps crossing this line and over until the big reveals where he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to destroy this planet and I've already destroyed this one. And he does talk about some of his other experiments from the comic books, which I really did appreciate. They gave some nods to it. But, there was enough to him that I thought he was a very interesting villain. He wasn't as vanilla as I thought he was going to be. And with him not dying, they could bring him back in conjunction with some of the other characters or another storyline.
But even if he did die, they'd be able to, use him in flashbacks of, well, here's some other projects that he's worked
right.
on,
Yeah,
in the past. So I think that, yeah, we can definitely see him again one way or the other. But yeah, I think it's very calculated. James Gunn would never say this, but I wonder if he was told you can't kill any of the Guardians, and we want you to leave the door open for High Evolutionary because we don't know what we're gonna do. You know, did he want to kill any of them, or did he like
right.
this idea of setting them all off out into the wild, basically?
Yeah, that was my big surprise. Which one are they killing? They
Yeah,
got to kill somebody, and I just felt it was coming. I'm like, is it gonna be Rocket? Is it gonna be because Dave's come out and said I don't want to be this character. I know Zoe is like, yeah, I'm done with this character, and I'm like, well, this would be a really powerful, impactful way to do it. Let's get a really great hero's death in there, like Black Widow was, something like that. So yeah, to my chagrin / surprise, when I was like, oh,
Yeah, and kudos to whoever cut the trailer because they took all those moments where you thought somebody was dying in the movie and made it look like, oh, somebody's definitely
yeah,
even Nebula carrying passed out Star-Lord. I remember going like, oh my God, is he dead? No, he's
yeah,
just
right.
drunk.
yeah. Right, exactly. He's just drunk, and then when Star Lord was screaming over Rocket's body in the trailer, you didn't know who it was.
You saw
You know,
Rocket, it looked like he was dying, and then you see Star-Lord screaming, and you're like, oh, that's just, oh my God, is it going to be him? Nah, I thought it was brilliant marketing.
there was there were a couple scenes towards the end that I'm still like, that doesn't seem to make sense, and it's not necessarily a story thing. So, in the end of the movie, when the Guardians of the Galaxy, when they kind of break it off into like those three separate parts to fight and stuff. One, Rocket's window, his windshield got totally busted through when it was in space. And the first thing I thought of is, well, he's got to be toast because he was in space. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't his ship, the one Rocket was piloting, in space when the Hellhounds or whatever totally crashed through his windshield? Which means all the air rushes out and Rocket should
Yeah.
be toast.
I've seen it twice, and I don't remember thinking that, but I think you could be right. And they definitely, having watched the first one yesterday, there are a lot of instances where windshields crack in space, and in these movies, they're like, meh, that's all right,
Yeah.
and in in the first movie, they're able, and really through the second, there, because in the second movie there's basically this idea that Peter burns up like all of whatever the celestial energy that he got by being Ego's son,
Right.
and not having that in the third one makes you think about, like when you think that he might have died just because he went back to get his Zune, which would have been a fitting way for him to die.
Yeah.
We all know you've got that helmet that can go over your face. You use it to save Gamora's life in the first movie. You don't have it in that moment when you're in space. I mean, clearly he didn't, otherwise he would have put it on. But you would think you would be more prepared for it. It wasn't, and sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to give so-and-so my helmet, sometimes you just got to add one line like that, and
Right.
because that's still a moment that, you really think like, I can't believe this is how he's going to die, but he's off in space and he can't survive that anymore. But I guess.
Well, see, and that brings up,
yeah,
you bring up a good point, because when that happened in this movie with Quill in space, I was, I'm looking at my daughter and I'm going, this is total, what the hell? He can't last in space. But then I thought, oh wait, his dad's ego, whatever.
Ego.
But then, like you said, I totally forgot that he basically burned all that off and basically relinquished it all. So I guess he would just be human again. So, hold on. So it led me down a rabbit hole. When I got home, I Googled how long can a human last in space, right? 15 seconds. So when it happened in the movie, when I saw it the second time with Dennis, I actually counted 1,000. He was not out there for 15 seconds before Warlock got him. So
okay.
I was like, wow, that's pretty. Maybe they put that much thought into it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe James Gunn was like, well, he still has a little bit of ego, his dad in him. So we can say that's why he survived. I don't know, but I was because it is that little stuff. Because if you're trying to make us believe all this other crap that's going on, to me, you also have to sell the stuff that we know would happen. And you can't just, go past it that easily.
Well, that's the scene that I thought was the twist, because I thought when Star-Lord was dying in space and freezing, I was going, oh my God, this is when Gamora is going to return the favor, basically, and go out and find a way to rescue him, because she wasn't in the background scene. And I said it would be like a reversal when he had gone out to rescue her. I'm like, oh, that's going to be the nice moment. And you see the finger, kind of like the birth of Venus coming down. I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And it's Gamora. Oh, wait, it's Adam Warlock. Damn, that's not what I thought was going to happen.
Right, which from the power set of everybody there, he's the one that it makes sense could actually fly out there and save him. But I think from a storytelling standpoint, this Gamora sort of, sacrificing or possibly sacrificing herself the way that he did for her would have been a nice touch. But I think that, it wasn't. And that's interesting that you did the 15 seconds timing, Andy. I remember the second time I went to see Batman vs. Superman, I wanted to time just how long they're actually fighting. And I remember to this day, it was 8 minutes. So in a 2 hour and 40-minute movie, they fight for 8 minutes. But anyway, it's the title of the movie and you give us 8 minutes of it. But anyway, So what I want to ask you guys before we run out of time, I've heard different reactions to when we hear Groot say, I love you guys. And now I've read James Gunn's official explanation for this, but I want to know what you guys thought when you saw it and to see if you thought what I did, which is that we in the audience are part of the family.
Yes. That's exactly what I thought.
And we understand him now the way that Gamora
understand him like Gamora could.
Yeah, that's what James Gunn says exactly. Because somebody asked that question on Twitter. He wrote back, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but yes, exactly. Because it's like Gamora understands him in that moment right before that. And then we can understand him. And because the fact that they didn't react was so much more pronounced the second time I saw it. I'm like, if he said something other than I am Groot, they would all be like, what the hell?
Right.
But at the same time, they can understand him. So maybe they wouldn't notice. So I thought it could have been that, that it's like, yes, he said something else, but they hear him all the time. So I thought it was kind of a nice moment, but there were some questions as to which one it was, and I think that's why James Gunn stepped in and told us. But I thought it was a great moment, sort of, this idea, and I love the shot that's kind of unnecessary, except for building up the story of this Gamora. That Peter even says to her, "You're always looking for a family. You don't have it with the Reavers," but then it shows us actually she does.
Right,
And I thought that just seeing how happy they were to have her back, I'm like, okay, that's a nice ending to that character, this version of Gamora, who we may or may not ever see again. You never know. So I don't know. I think that they tied things up really nicely at the end. Sorry.
No, I hope we do get to see her, because I like this version of Gamora, and I really would like to see what she would turn into later on, either with them or maybe she's off on her own doing something. But I really enjoyed what they did, what Zoe did with her character, how it was written, how she acted it. So I'm piqued. My curiosity is piqued. What are you going to do next? I actually hope we get to see her at least one more time at some point.
I liked, so back to the Groot thing. Yeah, 100%. First time I saw it and he said, "I love you," I looked at Courtney and I was like, "Oh my God, he's finally saying that we can understand Groot. That is so cool." So I thought that was great. When Groot said, "I am Groot" to Gamora in the end, and she just basically, she could understand him and went along with it. And then she realized, oh shit, I can understand him. That was great. Mantis and Drax, when they were on, and me, I always forget the names of things. They were on that corporation, organic world, whatever, were a great coupling. But one of the best parts, he was only on screen for a little bit. Nathan Fillion was freaking
love Nathan Fillion.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I loved his running gag of, "Oh yeah, I got one of those too."
Oh my God. When they were in that room and then Drax starts going, "And I'm angry too. We're in these suits, blah, blah, blah." I was just like, holy shit. The way Star-Lord pulls it off.
His facial expressions, yeah, I've got one of those too. And he goes and looks at him, and his facial expressions, and when he turns back, this is why you love Nathan Fillion. I mean, there's a reason why we're Brown Coat fans. Is he was just awesome, and he wasn't in there a lot, but it was just so well done.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great. And, in that same sequence, I think it's a great moment for Mantis and Drax when, she says to the guy, "You're in love with him." And just his reaction is every time. And she's just laughing like a little kid. I think that's the one thing that I think I'll miss is not getting more of the two of them together,
Well, they really did so much more with her. And even when she had Drax have that little talk with Peter Quill, and then Drax, of course, after he's done, and Quill's like, "Wow, that really doesn't seem that could come out of your mouth." And he just starts improvising with his, "I can do analogies, I can do metaphors." And the last shot when he looks over and sees Mantis and she's like this was just perfect.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that it's a fun character. And I don't know what Mantis heading off on her own surprised me a little bit. I think logically, she says it, I've served Ego. I've been a part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I just want to kind of figure. So I'm hoping that there's at least I don't know, a Disney Plus movie or maybe a miniseries. As long as they don't squander the opportunity to tell more stories with her, I think it'll be all right that she's not there with the Guardians at the end of the movie. But I mean, I can only imagine what Feige has on his desk of the things that are definitely happening. There's probably there's a maybe pile of stuff that we could always do this for Disney Plus or something down the road. I guess we'll have to see. But hopefully we see her again. And you never know. Maybe Bautista would be more inclined to be Drax again, because if you notice the last few times he's been Drax, they've let him wear a shirt. So I think that makes it a little bit easier for him. I think.
Well, that was one of the reasons he said it's just so much work at my age and it's funny he says my age because he's as old as we are.
Yeah.
And it is true for him to stay in that shape.
I did like the shirt, the suit. it clashes with my skin.
No, he said his. Didn't he say his eyes?
I think he said his
Uh,
eyes. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
his
his
eyes,
eyes.
yeah.
Yeah,
It was just
that's a great
awesome.
Stallone moment where he's like, "What?"
Yes.
Well, and Stallone, dude, when he was outside in space with his helmet on, I was like, freaking Starhawk. Oh, yes. I want to see more Stallone in the outfit with the helmet in space doing stuff. That was just awesome.
Yeah, no,
It-
I always liked that that group of characters or the guardian. They're all the guardians that I thought of, including
Right.
Yondu. You know, I mean, like just from the early '90s. I don't know any earlier iterations than that. Like
Right.
what was
yeah.
it the Jim Valentino run? I think
Yeah.
you know. And the idea that we had these, because I remember when the first movie was first announced, I'm like, I know Rocket Raccoon, and I don't know who anybody else is. And then I remembered Nebula eventually, you know, because I remember her showing up in the Avengers in the late 80s, you know, or the mid 80s. And, you know, so I like that there's at least a nod to those characters and they've been in the other movies. I can't imagine that we'll ever get a story, you know, starring them, which is okay. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably not.
probably not. But the goosebump moment, I would say, dealing with those characters was Michael Rooker when he makes his little
Yep.
cameo. That was one of those right there. And I already told my sister-in-law, I'm like, yeah, bring some Kleenex or extra napkins for the kids because there's a few moments in there. I think we're going to get a few tears this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, there was like the second time I saw it, I was like probably more emotional than I was the first time because I know it's
Really?
coming, even though I know that somebody's not dying. You
Right.
know, Rocket's not dying, but they have the way that they have it structured where he could have been dying, where Star-Lord could have been dying, where, you know, Drax takes a shot to the front and into the back. And you're like, oh, yeah, they make it so that any one of them could have died
Yes.
at least once. And, you know, some of them get really strong death scenes. It's just they don't actually die. You know, I think that James Gunn might have played with our emotions a little bit there, but you know, it was incredibly well done.
Well, and then, he capped it off with the fight scene with all the Guardians finally back together in the end of the movie. And it was that hallway fight scene,
Oh,
against the high evolutionaries, goons, and the hellhounds, whatever.
best fight
And-
scene in a long time.
Oh my
I'm
God.
gonna
Just
say.
one of my favorite fight scenes was from the first season. I believe it was the first season of Daredevil where it was the one shot in the hallway.
In the hallway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling I got from this, even though in this, the camera moved. Because in that Daredevil one, the camera was pretty much stationary as he worked his way down. But this one, just the camera movements that they did, the ins and outs and going around bodies and stuff, and the choreography of it was just gorgeous, And then even the stuff like, Drax throws his knife into that dude's leg and pins him against the wall, and then the dude from his body weight pivots around.
Yep.
And he's still stuck there with the knife. It's just
The special effects tied in with the practical effects tied in very well with, all of the stunt work that was done and the choreography. I mean, to me, was a masterpiece fight scene. I thought it was just utterly fantastic, which brings me to a point. The CG in this, I made the comment as soon as it was done. I was like, when the movie was done, I was like, this is really damn good CG. I mean, this is the best stuff that I've seen come out of Marvel since Infinity War, because a lot of this other stuff has been very iffy.
Yeah, James Gunn posted that the first day of shooting was the beginning of all the mocap stuff with Rocket and the other animals, because they knew that, as much faith as they have in their VFX team, they knew that they were going to need the most amount of time with those sequences to make them look believable.
Sure.
And, look, it wouldn't have been hard for you to look at those and you go like, I can't imagine these characters interacting with each other. Like, I don't believe any of this.
Right.
But that's not the way it was on the screen. I mean, that's what happens when you have a Disney budget. You believe that this raccoon is talking to an otter with metal arms and, a walrus with wheels, so
that just shows one of the failings with Marvel, though, is you can't go backwards once you set a bar. And with all the CG, with the CG they have to do on some of their TV shows, because the budgets are lower, they're going backwards. And that hurts them. I mean, you look at She-Hulk, whether you like this show or not, the CG was pretty damn bad, you
Yeah.
know? And
And
you
CG
can't,
in She-Hulk, it was in the way where when it was good, you were like, oh, that shot's good or this scene's good. And then
right.
other times you're like, oh man, think about what it would look like on the big screen if Jennifer was hulked out while Bruce is hulked out. But then on the small screen, yeah, you definitely can see it. I hadn't thought of it that way. There's definitely there's the movie budget versus the TV budget for sure.
Yeah, they're. I was going to say the one surprise so far is that their box office has been surprisingly lower than what I thought it was going to be. I just pulled up the current stats because I was just thinking about it. The domestics at 127 million, internationals at 191. So they got a worldwide of 318 right now, and this was not a cheap film at all. Just like a lot of their big ones. I honestly thought it was going to do a lot better, particularly maybe it will, maybe it won't have the dramatic week 2 and week 3 drop offs that their last 6 movies have. But I know looking at what their numbers were, they have to break about at least, unless they even have a bigger budget, at least 800 million probably to break even on it. And honestly, I don't know if they're going to get to it on this.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember the second Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie made like 600 million, and that was considered a failure.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, and I think that when you think about the recent MCU movies, I think that the word of mouth on this film is a lot better than those. So I would be interested to see what week 2 and 3 drop-offs are going to be. Once Transformers and Fast X and other stuff start coming out, I think that's a different conversation. But these next couple weeks, I think that it has a chance to, obviously there's going to be drop-off, but I think that it won't be as sharp. I think that, even though I, for the most part, liked Ant-Man, I know that the word of mouth was not good for it.
Right.
I think that the drop off, I think, will be less for this.
Yeah, I hope so. It's, yeah.
Well, and there's also, it's the problem too is they're so spaced out. That was another thing Marvel did. They set up originally back with, after the first Iron Man, with the success of it, basically going, okay, we'll get a sequel in 2 years, and obviously there was COVID and stuff like that screwed everything up and pushed stuff back. But once again, out of sight, out of mind, and you might have a lot of people go, I'm so used to watching stuff on my big screen at home, I'll just wait,
Well, and the other thing is that they're going to miss out on. We typically think about the Superman, the Batman movies, big blockbuster hits. When it's done, it goes to DVD market. So you had your DVD, Blu-ray, 4K market, and these aren't hardly going to do that because now everything goes and it goes directly to Disney Plus. So they will release it, and this will be a movie I buy in 4K. But there aren't going to be that many. They're losing a whole secondary market money-wise to recapture some of their expenses later on because Disney Plus isn't going to.
Yeah, I mean they're not heading over to Disney Plus quite as quickly as they were like when Shang-Chi came out. But I know what you're saying. That is where they'll end up. And okay, whether it's 3 months or 4 months, there are definitely people. I was at my daughter's dance class the other day and a couple of the dads were talking about it, and one of them had a little one, and you're like, well, I haven't been to the movies in a while, so I'll probably catch this on Disney Plus, and I think a few years ago that it wasn't like, what am I going to do? Watch it in 1 year on HBO, so I think that it's a little too easy to skip out on movies now, which seems to be, why there's so much focus now on, only in theaters. But for how long? And
right, exactly.
And once again, that's another thing that as an industry they screwed up with putting the stuff so fast onto streaming stuff, because you nailed it. I remember, what was it? It was only a decade ago or less where it was like, oh, this movie's out. Well, in a year, it'll be on HBO. It'll be the Saturday night movie on HBO. But when now it's like a window of only 3 months or so, and let's for fun, how many months before you think Guardians goes on to Disney Plus, Christian?
I would bet right after the summer. So it's what, early May. So yeah, I think September. I think that,
What about you?
Yeah, I was thinking back to school time.
yeah.
I'm going to go with, just to be contrary, I'm going to say they smarten up and want to push it until at least October or November when the Marvels comes out.
I think that would be smart if they want to, have you be able to purchase it, digitally, and then you have another window for the Blu-ray. That's usually what they do. That could definitely be it. Yeah. And, sort of what you were saying about the release schedule. I think that I don't think it was their choice that they did it for this reason, but I think it's good that the Marvels doesn't come out till November, because it was originally, I think, well, not originally, but it was going to be July. And I'm like, that feels a little soon, unless it had been a continuation of this story. I think it's good to give it a little bit more time to, hopefully they work on it. They get a little bit more time to render some effects, as we were talking about. And, it looks fun from the trailer. Sitting there with my wife, she didn't enjoy the first Captain Marvel movie, but she did say that one looks like it'll be fun. So, I'm looking forward to it. I like all those characters, because when I started reading comics, Monica Rambeau was Captain Marvel, and I'm glad to see her, getting some real screen time.
All right. Well, as we start wrapping up, one of the things we always do in the DNA show is we give a rating for the movie. It's a CGC rating for comics. It's 0.5 for a absolute stinker, no cover on it, to all the way to a 10.0, which is a unicorn. We've never had one on the show yet. Christian, why don't you go first? Give us what your thought on put you in the hot seat.
I think that I'm deducting a little bit from the fact that they didn't make the storytelling choice to have the tragedy of any of them dying. Even if I had disagreed with who died versus who I thought should have died, I think it lost a little something. However, I would definitely send this movie off to CGC to be slabbed and graded. I'm going to give it a 9.
All right.
Yeah, so that's funny, because you and I are on the same page. I'm going with a 9 as well. I don't generally see a lot of movies twice, and if I do, not that quick. I saw it Friday, and then we saw it Monday night. And honestly, if I had the time, because it is a big chunk of time with the trailers, it does pull to almost 3 hours. I would probably see it again in theaters if I have the time. I enjoyed it that much. I think it's, number 2 was definitely just kind of but I love number 1, but I'm almost going with number 3 being my favorite one. So I'm going with a 9.
Wow. I don't think this has ever happened before, especially with 3 of us. I'm also giving it a 9.0. Wow. And it was a great movie. Number 1 just hit my heartstrings a little bit more. I thought this was a fantastic way to wrap up the characters, to send them off. It was a great salute. There were a few things I would have changed. I did want to see somebody actually pay the ultimate price and do it. But it didn't miss on many cylinders. It was good all the way through. I will be seeing it probably this weekend with my niece and nephew. So yes, this is a definite must-see in the movie. I'm going to try and see it in an IMAX. I saw it in a regular theater because this feels like an IMAX movie.
Is. That's how we saw it Friday.
Actually, the first time I saw it was IMAX. It's I'm very pro IMAX 2D projection. I will see a 3D, but I never feel like a movie really warrants it. Even Avatar. But if I can get a nice big image and I don't have to wear glasses during it, I'm pretty happy. Yeah, absolutely.
And I wouldn't mind a 4D. I just did the 4D for John Wick 4 when I was in Korea. It was another great experience. So if I can get in and sneak into a 4D theater to see this, I think this would be equally as good. Let's just pull up. Our IMDb rating for this movie is an 8.3. And on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics give it an 82. So they think it's fresh. The audience a 95. So the audience is really liking it. And there's not a large disparity this time between the critics and the audience, like there's many times are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially in this genre, a lot of times you'll see, critic rating of like 35, and then, even a movie that isn't beloved, like the audience is still like 40 points higher. So yeah, that's not that bad when you think about who critics are and what they like to complain about. What did you say, 83? That might as well be 100.
That is as close to everybody agreeing on a movie as we've had in a while.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you think of the MCU, I mean, it's like maybe Spider-Man No Way Home, but I'm sure that there was a lot of complaints about that too. But
honestly, if I was telling Andy earlier, that was what my comparison was. If I had to compare the two movies, I would give the edge to Spider-Man No Way Home just from, there were just a couple of factors. I love both movies, but I think that one just tugged on my strings a little bit more. Sure. Both were good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. Before we do, look at this. Randy says no new backers for Andy on Kor-Drath, but Christian picked up 2 new subs. And while we're on that topic, Christian, go ahead and pimp out what you want.
Yeah, you can find my YouTube channel. It is Blattcast, BLADTCAST. And tomorrow over there at 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific, we'll be doing a Guardians Volume 3 special of our own for a show that I do called Marvel Movie Talk. So please check that out over there, or you'll be able to get the audio version sometime after the fact. We always archive everything too. And I do have just an audio podcast called The Blattcast, BLADTCAST. Same spelling. You can find it anywhere. We've gone through a lot of movies already this year. It's not even summer yet. And we spent some time talking Star Trek Picard. So please find those. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And Andy Smith was a guest on a show that I do for the Geekscape Network called the Geekscape Book Club. We were talking about some recent Jim Starlin, Adam Warlock stories. And Andy popped in for about the last half hour. So you can find that there. And thanks again to Andy for joining us.
There you go. And of course, we have Kor-Drath The Reckoning now live on Indiegogo. This only says 79,566. We are over 80,000 because we did run a campaign on Kickstarter as well. So we're cruising towards 90,000 and that next stretch goal, which will be the Necronite playable character card. That's right. 76-page graphic novel, Kor-Drath, badass ball-busting barbarian action. I get that alliteration from Stan the Man Lee. 76 fantastic pages. Look at Randy. He's always on it with the math. Total currently $84,237, 1,393 backers. Guys, if you like fun action adventure, if you like Game of Thrones, Conan, Dungeons and Dragons, I guarantee you'll like Kor-Drath. Dennis and I are kicking butt, working our butts off on this. He put together a really great story. He's writing a 24-page game module so you can read the book. And if you like role-playing games, play the game with either your characters or the Kor-Drath characters. We already have some of their playable character cards unlocked in the stretch goals,
which you get for free.
Which everybody gets that backs the campaign. So not only do you get the book, you get these playable character 7x10 oversized cards as well, and the map of the Shattered Reach so you know where everything's taking place. Go check it out. The links are in the description below. You can read the first 8 pages on Indiegogo, or you can go to Kor-Drath.com and read the first 11 pages. And I think you'll be pleased. And because of your support, you're helping us bring this book to you. You guys are like the producers of a movie. So definitely check this out. And we will be back next week. What's this? To be a movie director is a narc job for sure. Okay. We'll be back next week. I got to talk to a buddy of ours about coming on. So once we get that locked down, we'll tell you who the guest is. And until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us. Christian, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Great having you on.
Always happy to do it.
Yeah, man. And we'll go out with the new Kor-Drath trailer. See you guys later.
Live long and prosper.
Bye-bye.